Hello, everybody. We are back again with another episode of the Nintendo Pipeline Podcast. I'm Clay. I'm going it solo this week, except for my special guest. What is your name?
I am Drew, also known as TehDrewsus.
And Drew is here because this episode's all about Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3 Plus, and we'll kind of get into what that is. But first, it is Mortal Kombat's 30th anniversary this year. This is kind of a celebration of that in a way. So I thought it would be nice to talk a little bit about how each of us got into Mortal Kombat to begin with. And since I don't feel like starting, I'm going to put you on the spot, Drew.
Perfect.
And you can tell me what got you into MK.
All right, cool. Well, um, honestly, it was 30 years ago, so that's like almost 3/4 of my life ago. So
Uh,
the memory is a little bit fuzzy, but I believe, if I recall correctly, some of my first memories of Mortal Kombat were actually at my friend's house on his Sega Genesis. So we were all part of Cub Scouts, and we all met at his house the one Friday a month that we had our little Cub Scout meeting or whatever. And he had Mortal Kombat down there, and everybody was playing, and there was this one kid that also had the game that was like really, really good at it. And it got to where I could finally beat him. And once I could beat him, he throws up, the same defense mechanism that every other 9, 10, or 11-year-old kid does. And he's like, "Oh, I quit this game. It's not fun anymore, and
yeah.
you're just obsessed with the game, so I'm not playing with you anymore." So, um, it didn't really spark an obsession. I learned how to play the game and I got pretty good at it. I got a Sega Genesis with Mortal Kombat for Christmas that year. That was my introduction. It was a while before I ever played Mortal Kombat in the arcade. It was before MK2 ever came out, but it had been on home consoles for a bit, I think, before I played it in the arcade.
Right. Um, I know a lot of our viewers, myself included, are just a bit too young to have been able to actually experience it as it happened. I got to experience it a little after it happened. My dad got me Mortal Kombat 3 on the Super Nintendo when I was like, God, too young is the answer.
Right.
And we were kind of obsessed with that game. That game terrified me. All the sounds and like voice work and all that stuff like made me want to shit my pants. Like I was so scared of Shao Kahn. Um, and we used to play each other. He was a big fan of Sector. He liked the robots. I don't really remember who I liked. I remember playing a bit of Liu Kang and stuff, but um, I ended up, uh, playing with him, and he kind of stunk because like all we really played together was like original Nintendo stuff. So we would play like Punch Out together, and I don't know if you've ever played Al Unzer's Turbo Racing on the
I have
NES.
not. No.
It's just like it's a very typical racing game. And we played
Okay.
that and like Blades of Steel and stuff like that.
Oh, I played Blades of Steel.
Yeah, Blades of Steel. All
Heck
we did
yeah.
was just cause fights. That was the only. We
Yes.
didn't even play the actual game. We just tried to make them fight, and that was our entertainment. Um,
Yeah.
so moving to MK3, and it was vanilla MK3, was kind of a lot for him. We didn't know like any moves. This was kind of before I was on the internet a bit, but I hadn't really like looked anything up in regards to it. So like it was us just figuring it out. Oh crap, he got a missile to shoot out. Oh, Liu Kang threw a fireball. How do we do that?
Yeah.
um, and that just kind of sparked a lifetime of this crap,
Yeah,
basically.
pretty much. I
Do
remember the
you?
first time I did Sub-Zero's fatality in MK1. I didn't even realize what I was doing at the time, and like the screen turned dark and he ripped his opponent's head off and my mom was watching.
Oh no.
Yeah. So
Oh,
that
must have went over great.
that went over like the Titanic.
Was that the end of MK in your house for a while?
For a little bit, yeah, yeah, it was.
Oh no. It's funny. A lot of the people who are listening to this, if they like Mortal Kombat, a lot of people got exposed to it through their home versions. Obviously, a lot of younger kids who probably shouldn't have been playing. So like those not amazing versions of the game are probably fresh in most people's, well, not fresh, but are probably what most people are familiar with. Um, and stuff like the blood code and all that fun stuff. I guess what is your? Do you remember the first time you played any version of MK3?
Yeah, it's in the I was in the arcade. I can't remember which arcade it was. It was one of the local ones. No, I do remember where it was. It was at the putt putt place close to my house. Back then, putt putt places like were a thing, and
Yeah,
they had arcades in them. And I walked in, and there was MK3. I was like, all right. And I got to the select screen. I'm like, all right, well, I had some moves with me just in case, and sure enough, there it was. And I got Cyrax out because he was like a robot scorpion.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
so I used Cyrax and I used Sub Zero. Uh, that was my first exposure to MK3. Was the arcade? Was the arcade at the putt putt place?
Yeah, we actually had one of those places nearby too. So it was funny. There was that place, and then there was a McDonald's right next to it. And the most depressing thing in my life, I think it kind of just taught me a lot about life in general, is when that place closed and it turned into a car dealership.
Oh gosh.
I was like, oh man, that's sad. That was sad. I don't think we had any of the MK arcade cabinets at the like local areas that had arcades. The only thing I remember there being was like a Donkey Kong 3 and like Primal Rage, I think was the other one. Um, so yeah, so it's been 30 years of Mortal Kombat. There have been highs and lows. Some would say many lows.
3D.
But
Yeah.
yeah, the 3D ones. I know we have some people who really love the 3D ones. I'm kind of mixed on the 3D ones. Um, but I think you'd probably agree with me if I said that your passion for MK is mostly in the original arcade trilogy, essentially. Not
Uh,
MK trilogy, but the
right.
arcade 1, 2, and 3. Um,
Definitely.
not
Definitely.
MK4.
It's fun every once in a while, but not
It's
nearly
yeah.
like the other three.
Did you ever end up playing the 3D MKs at all? Like much?
I played a little bit. Uh, what was the first 3D one? Was it
Oh,
Deception or Deadly
Deadly
Alliance?
Alliance.
I played a little bit of Deadly Alliance. I didn't even do the story mode. I just played a couple of arcade towers,
Right.
and I couldn't get used to it.
Yeah, it was a very different system, I guess you could say. It was played very differently, and it
Yeah.
was very janky. I mean, MK's always been jank, but like it was like jank in a different way.
Yes.
Um, and I know you got in, but you did get into MK9,
I did for a little bit. Yeah. Yeah. It had been out for a little bit. It had been, gosh, it had been out for probably right about a year before I got it.
Yeah,
Because I think the version I had was there a greatest hits? No, no, it was. I got Mortal Kombat Complete is what it was.
oh yes,
MK9 Complete.
yep,
Yeah, so that's when I picked it up. Got it on the PS3.
yep. That I also got it on PS3. And for
And
anyone who's
that
yeah,
game is actually really fun. I
it
had
is
a lot
super
of fun
fun.
with it. Um, I wasn't very good at it competitively, but I wasn't good at anything competitively back then. So
I'm still not good at anything competitively. And for anyone who doesn't know, MK9 is referring to the game that was just called Mortal Kombat. It was the reboot. I want to say it released in 2011. Um,
2011, yep.
it was the retelling of the first three games, which made some story choices that we won't talk about. But Drew, you did get into competitive Ultimate MK3,
Yes.
and you have a history in that. Tell me a little bit about that.
I did. So, without getting into too many details, I kind of needed something to pass my time, and I was watching some YouTube videos, and I was like, I saw something about arcade collection that was out, and it had been out for a little while before I downloaded it. I actually got it after all the patches were made because pre-patch MK Arcade Collection, UMK3, and I presume the other games too were just terrible, terrible emulation.
Yeah.
So I got it, and it was kind of like, oh yeah, I remember these games. I used to be pretty good at them, and like I played some arcade towers on all three of them, decided to go online, and the first time I go online, I get crushed, and then
Of
I
course.
get like, Xbox Live style hate mail. Now I'm on PSN, but I know what Xbox Live hate mail looks like. Uh, and that's exactly what I got. Like, okay, why am I going to do this? So I ran into a few good players, some people that weren't complete jerks, got a microphone so I could talk to people, which sometimes was a mistake, but
Yeah.
uh, and then it was sometime, I think in 2012, that I was watching. I found this video, and it was Road to Evo. I can't remember what year it was. Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3, Shock versus Li Joe, and it was
Yes.
the grand finals of Road to Evo, and I watched that. And kind of early on in the video, Shock pulls this like massive combo with Sonya. He ends up losing the round and losing the match not long after he does the combo, but he does this crazy combo, and with every like tacked on juggle hit, like the crowd gets louder and louder and louder.
Yeah.
And I kept watching the finals, and as exciting as the final match was, it was just like, this game is cool. I want to do that. And so I started playing more and more and more and more. And basically, like, if I wasn't working, if I didn't have my kids with me, if I wasn't like working out at the gym or doing something around the house, once all the housework got done, like, I was in front of the TV playing UMK3.
And it just took off from there for you.
And it took off, and it's still going.
Yeah. And I guess it's probably a good time to mention, you run an MK event, that's usually happens yearly,
Yes.
the Cincinnati Combat Classic.
Yep, CKK. It typically runs the first weekend in April. Of course, the great human malware
Yep.
kind of threw a wrench into things. We'd had events in 2016, 17, 18, and 19, and they grew every year. We added tournaments, more people came, and it was growing every year. And then, of course, 2020 hit, uh, so there was no tournament at all in 2020. Um, the 2021 event got moved back to October, and of course that was like right as the fourth wave or whatever was starting to
Yeah.
kick up. And when that happened, just, people started dropping off, and so we had kind of a smaller event. And the truth is, I didn't really want to have event two events 6 months apart, because I've got a lot going on. I got
Yeah.
4 kids, man.
I don't
and
have 4 kids, and that's a lot.
and yeah, running 2 events 6 months apart from each other, um, is not a good idea. So we're gonna have it again in April of 2023. So we're taking basically a year and a half off, and then we're gonna get back into it. It's going to be the same thing where we have events and people. It's a weekend long event. People start showing up on Friday night for casuals, and we have tournaments starting about noon on Saturday. We run 2 or 3 events on Saturday, 2 or 3 events on Sunday, and the people that show up are all very cool people, very easy to get along with most of the time, myself included.
Most of the time, he says.
Yeah, myself included. And just great competitors. And it's a small community to begin with. And when people get together in person, it's just really fun. There's there's your typical event stress from running a whole bunch of
Yep.
tournament games, but it really is a good time.
Yeah, and you stream these each time as well. So if people can't come, but they would like to kind of see what it's all about, your YouTube has past events, and I'm imagining this upcoming one you'll be streaming again as well.
Oh, definitely, for sure.
And we're gonna make sure to get all of that fun, juicy contact info in the description and stuff towards the end too. Um, so I guess we can talk about now, kind of start talking about the main thing for this episode, which is Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3 Plus. So Drew is the lead developer for this particular game, and I guess in your own words, how would you describe UMK 3 Plus?
Um, to describe it from a non-technical,
Yeah,
uh, hacker or competitor or um, whatever you want to call it, uh, from not that perspective, from a personal perspective, it is a love letter to the arcade era Mortal Kombat games.
yeah, I
Yeah, it.
that's pretty accurate.
Yeah,
So essentially, UMQ3 Plus is part of a series of Mortal Kombat Plus games. So you recently released Beta 2 of UMK3 Plus, and the current beta for Mortal Kombat 2 Plus is also, I think, Beta 2.
right.
And that's Paul's main project.
Correct.
Um,
Yep.
how did you? So you go from playing it and you're competitive, and I know at least when you're doing that sort of thing, you do often wonder or learn a bit about how the game itself works at a very core level. What point did that translate into? Okay, now I kind of want to hack it a bit and see what I can do.
Well, there was another hack of the game that came out, I think sometime in late 2014, early 2015 or so.
Hmm.
And while it w- some people in the community received it well, um, it kind of soured out, and most people didn't receive it that well. Uh, and I won't get into the specifics of that, but it made me think, wow, maybe I can do something with this. Um,
Right.
and I kind of it was a little while before that came out, like I said, 2000, late 2014, early 2015. It wasn't until probably early 2017 that I started looking into uh, what I could do with the game and really start learning from there. I mean, it was things as simple as like nothing more than text edits, or
Right.
instead of Night Wolf, T NIGHTWOLF.
You got it. You got it.
Yeah, instead of spelling it the way it's spelled, changing it to, like, just to be funny, NITEWOLFE. You know,
Right.
Still Night Wolf, just totally different way of
Yeah. Yeah.
spelling it.
Just kind of like I messed with this thing
Yeah, 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 and
and it
and and
worked.
yeah, and different things like that. Messing with some of the palette colors and things like that.
Oh boy,
And
yeah, I know
then,
you love Palace.
oh
We'll
man,
get to
don't.
that.
So, and then that was like I said, around 2017. I had a hack of the game out there called it was just called Revision 1.3, and it wasn't anything special. That there were some bug fixes, there was some like some color palettes added for like some of the finishers, like Cabal's ghost, like his mask off
Right.
fatality. Uh, like I think all three, or no, yeah, maybe all three of the female ninjas had the same ghost. Like Sector and Smoke had the same ghost or something like that.
Right, they didn't have like unique matching.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
they didn't have, making Noob Saibot finishable. So many things from back then that I don't remember them all. I have a change log somewhere. Um,
I know you do.
but it was right about like that time, like 2016 into 2017, I started learning about Paul's work with MK2 Plus. And so I ended up getting in touch with him. And I had somebody tell me once, uh, when I was starting to work on revision 1.3, I had somebody tell me, like, well, Paul's going to be doing UMK3 at some point, so it's probably not even worth your time. And I was
Right.
just like, and this is somebody that like I'm actually really close with, like that I'm like we're good friends. We were good friends then. We're still good friends now. And I was like, huh, okay. So that was even more like, all right, let me see what I can do here. And then right around uh, the beginning of late 2017, early 2018, after, I had been talking with Paul for probably 6 months and he had been showing me some things. And I was like, look, UMK3 will probably be best served if we do something together.
Right.
And he's like, okay, well, welcome to Team Plus or something like that. Uh, and so Beta 1 was a true collaboration between Paul and myself, and we used 1.3 as a base. I think we rolled back a few changes, but we used 1.3 as a base.
Yeah, all the blood doesn't stay on the floor anymore. I
Yeah.
remember that's my favorite thing about 1.3 is all the blood stays there, and then the game doesn't like that very much.
Well, I think the blood doesn't all stay on the floor. It
Oh,
it
I
takes
see.
it takes a long time for it to dissipate.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
Yeah, but I learned that one kind of, I learned that one like after maybe the first quote unquote beta of 1.3.
Right.
So, but yeah, and then beta 2 came out probably about three. Wait a minute, 19, 2.5 years later. Uh,
Oh God.
beta, yeah,
Yep.
yeah, two and a half
Yep.
years later. Uh,
Still
yeah.
think about that and how much time that you've spent dealing with Ed Boon's code.
Yeah, yeah. Well, hey, I mean, and Paul had released uh, MK2 plus Beta 2, I think late 2018, early 2019, and then he started working on MK plus, while I basically went right into UMK3 plus Beta 2 development.
Right.
And so uh, that one was, I'd say, 99.5% uh, my work on that one. I hit Paul
Yeah.
up for a few things. We spent a couple hours trying to find uh, the checksum for I think
Oh,
the U2 chip that was
yes.
replaced, and like we finally found it. It was like, uh, he's like, I think it's here somewhere. I'm like, yeah, it's got to be on the chip itself. And we looked, and he's like, "Oh, wait a minute. Yeah, when I did like, because he changed the U2, I think on MK2 plus Beta 2. He made
Hmm.
some modifications. He was like, "Yeah, it is there." And I was like, "Is it right here?" Yeah, that's it. All right.
Yeah. All right. Sweet.
So then from there, I figured out how to update the checksum to make it work, to make the checksum correct, and to show green on the board test.
Right.
So
Yeah, so I guess one thing real quick before we kind of get into some of the additions and changes in UMK3 Plus is these hacks are all made to work on original hardware. That is the primary goal.
that is the primary goal.
It's not one of those hacks. It's like, oh, this will only run in MAME, or you know it
Right.
runs off of Magic or whatever. There are
Mugen.
yeah Mugen, all that fun stuff. Yeah, there's no MK4 Rico Quan Chi Chi, any any of that. It's very true to to the arcade, and the content
Yes.
that has been added is made to be in line with something that would have been, you know, maybe possible, or something that would at least fit in with the other content in the game.
Yes.
Um, so that means Drew has a legion of hardware testers, um, because stuff that will work on MAME will often not work on hardware, will cause weird things, um, which kind of brings another sort of dimension, I think, to developing for it, because something can work for a little while, and then you put it on hardware and the machine just crashes for no apparent reason.
Yeah, yeah. I like to say that MAME gives you some creative liberty that the hardware
Yeah,
will not allow you to have. Yeah.
that's a good way of saying. Um, so and this includes, I think something that I've personally found very interesting about the project is that for running Ultimate MK3 Plus on original hardware, there are additional chips that have been added, additional
Yes.
graphics chips, and I
Hmm.
want to say a sound chip. Is that accurate?
That's right. Yep,
Okay,
it is. The four graphics chips were added for Beta 1. They were unchanged for Beta 2. And then the U2 chip was added. Then obviously the two program ROMs.
right, right.
Yeah.
So I mean, think of, like, for anyone who's might not have too much of a concept of what's going on, it's kind of like if you took Super Mario 64 and then, like, you added the expansion pack to it, and the game recognized it and could take advantage of it. Like, it's the original configuration. It could not run it, but if you get those extra chips and flash them, you will have a functional, Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3 Plus that will play on arcade hardware.
Yep.
Um, so with Beta 1, you added, there's a couple of big things, I would say, that were added. So first was Rain,
Yep.
um, everyone's favorite purple ninja, and you had to make his moves from scratch,
Yes.
essentially.
Yes.
Tell me about what it's like to have to even if you have, like, existing animations or graphics that were added, to the chips, so you didn't necessarily have to, quote unquote, like, make the artwork yourself. Tell me what it's
Right.
like to still have to make the moves from scratch, because Rain has some weird properties to his moves.
He does. So yeah, the one property of like his lightning bolt is it's just like it drops down on you vertically. So
Right,
and it's got kind of a funky hitbox because it's not a very and it doesn't become active until the animation basically hits the floor. And the animation or the hitbox stays active through several frames of that lightning going hitting the floor and uh, expanding out like the shockwave on the ground.
right,
So several years ago, there was that N64 beta dump that had the source code to go along with it, along
right.
with
The
several
MK
other, yeah, the
the
MK
MK
trilogy dump.
trilogy. Yep.
Yep, that actually had a lot of stuff on it. That
Yeah, that was
that
very
entire
interesting.
dump, yeah. And Rain's moves were in there. So, as someone that didn't know what he was doing at the time, it was it gave me something to go on, but I had to basically take pieces of code from other characters' moves and just kind of feel my way through how how animations worked, how uh, you know how long do you wait, from when the character, when Rain lifts his hand up, how long do you wait before the lightning comes down? How fast does that lightning need to be? Uh, the reaction was actually pretty easy, uh, and uh, just stuff like that, and trying to create a balance of like, how long is he in his sitting duck frames? Like, how free is this move?
Right.
Um, the really tough one, actually.
Yep.
Uh, the super roundhouse wasn't that hard. Balancing the super roundhouse so he couldn't pull an infinite on people wasn't that hard. The fun part was um, oh gosh, the fun part,
The orb.
yeah, the mind control orb, because you had control of the other person, or you had control of the opponent
Right.
for so many frames, and so Abystus, who is kind of like the godfather of midway arcade game hacking, um, kind of like the proud dad of the whole
Yeah.
of the proud dad of Team Plus, really. Um, he has in a lot of cheats for the older games, you have free fly cameras, and several of those were his doing.
Oh,
So
okay.
yeah, so basically player so with his free fly, or yeah, free like the free fly camera, player 2 can still control their character. Player one's character is no longer controlled, but the camera is instead. So I took pieces uh, of his free fly camera code, and I applied that into basically allowing, the attacking Rain to take control of the other character. Now there's all kinds of other stuff too, right? Like
Right.
how many what's the frame delay between when their next move is calculated? How high up can you take them? How low can you take them? Uh, and because the floor is different heights on certain stages,
Right. Yep.
you have to account for that too. So that was uh, that was the biggest challenge for Rain.
Yeah.
The most fun thing for Rain was making his fatalities.
Yeah. So I was actually going to ask you about that. So, you, I imagine it's fun on some level to kind of sit there and be like, all right, now I get to make a fatality because everyone who's played Mortal Kombat has always had ideas for fatalities. What is it? What is the process of creating a fatality with respect to having to work within the original games, you know, systems?
Well, I mean, the first thing is it can't be. I don't want to say too creative because that's not true.
I know what you mean. Yeah.
You can't take too many liberties before you start to encroach on what is outside of the spirit of the arcade game, right? So
Right.
we're not going to take it too serious. Like it's like it's still kind of dark, but it also doesn't take itself too seriously. Um, and at the
And
same time, we want to make something that is original, but still could have fit in the arcade days. So, of
right.
course, Rain was never in the arcade games. He was in the home ports of UMK3 and he was in Trilogy, but he was never in the arcade. The part of the attract mode that you see Rain for about 2 seconds is just a reskinned reptile.
Right.
Uh, there's a little piece of code that uh, you know gives him that funky looking life bar, and it gives him a different palette, but it's reptile.
Hmm.
Um,
It's very much one of those like those classic Mortal Kombat, like they got you, like you
yeah,
think something's there and it's not.
right, exactly. And so, like, trying to think outside the box yet think inside the arcade cabinet. That's a good one.
That is a good one.
Yeah. But trying to do those things is like, what can we do that's really cool with Rain that still stays true to the arcade vision?
Right.
And it's
Because
like,
Rain has in Trilogy, Rain has the well-known the uppercut that splits them into three and then they land upside down. And I know you love that fatality a lot.
that's my favorite one. Yeah, favorite one. That's like, name the dumbest fatality, and I will use that
Yeah.
to counter. Yeah,
Yeah.
every time. So it's like, okay, we're not doing that. That fatality sucks.
Yeah. Yeah, agreed.
So it's like, what can we do? Like I said, what can we do that's cool but still fits into the arcade vision? And it's like, okay, so he has a really cool lightning strike, and he already has a lightning strike fatality where he hits you with a bunch of lightning strikes and then hits you with another one and you blow up.
Sure.
Uh, but that's still pretty cool. And his roundhouse sends you across, to the other side of the screen. Like, okay, what's the coolest thing you can do in Mortal Kombat? Uppercut the guy's head off. Just not every segment of his body going up and coming down. It's
You're
like,
right.
okay, it's like, okay, well, let's roundhouse the guy's head. Let's do a roundhouse decapitation. Oh, okay. Let's do a roundhouse decapitation where his head comes back across the screen and lands at Rain's feet. Okay. Well, what can we do with the body that's just standing there and looking stupid?
Right.
Let's blow it up.
Right.
And that's exactly what I did
Yep.
without making it take too long, without adding anything, silly. Remember, this was a game that was designed to take your quarters, not and look really fun and be really loud while it's doing it, but
Right.
not some massive display of what the TMS hardware can do. So,
Yeah.
roundhouse, lightning, boom, we're
And
done.
then that's it.
And
Yeah.
that's it.
And I think that, yeah, I think some people listening might be more familiar with some of the newer Mortal Kombats, and how they handle fatalities in those games is they're almost like little cinematics. Um,
Yeah.
they kind of go through this whole thing, and um, that I guess that can work, when you're dealing with a home system, because it's not like you're trying to get people to pop quarters in and play like rapidly. But in arcade, the fatalities are pretty like straightforward. Like they do their thing and they're over.
Yeah.
Um, so it would have been weird if you made something where it was like, roundhouse kick his head off, and then he, stands there and does another pose, and then, I don't know, whatever, how they have like the multi-stage kind of,
Uppercuts his torso.
yeah, yeah. And then,
And then,
yeah,
yeah, sticks his upside down torso back onto his head.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So you had Rain. I know another big thing for Beta 1 that you and Paul worked on together was getting brutalities into the game,
Yes.
which is a feature on a lot of the home versions and in Mortal Kombat Trilogy, but were never actually in the arcade version.
Right.
And for anyone who's not familiar, the brutalities are basically like you essentially do a really long combo on somebody, almost like Killer Instinct, except they explode at the end. That was the classic Mortal Kombat brutality. Um, and then you added one of my favorite things, the MKX style brutalities.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah,
Yes. So actually, Paul messaged me one like Monday morning or something. He was like, "Oh, by the way, I slipped, tripped, and added brutalities to the game over the weekend." I was like,
yeah,
"Oh,
just like
you
that.
did?" Yeah, because
That
Paul can
sounds
do
about
that.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Uh, and like the reason I think it was ever conceived in the first place to put brutalities into uh, the arcade hardware, it was because on the sound chips, the brutality sound clip from Shao Kahn exists.
right.
There
Just goes
was no
unused.
right, completely unused, and it's not even referenced. There's a utility out there that lets you go through all the sound clips on a chip, but I found the brutality clip. I'm like, I bet we could do something with this, and it just kind of got, yeah, we'll get to that later, maybe. And then Paul did it one weekend. I was like, that's actually pretty cool. So the classic style brutalities, the credit goes to Paul for the build on that.
Right.
I helped test them and make sure they were getting them right. I offered up a few tweaks, like he coded it basically almost directly from the N64 trilogy beta source code.
Oh,
Uh,
okay. Yeah.
And one of the things you notice if you do a brutality and on the N64, if you do a brutality and you fail in the middle, all of the sound cuts out. Like you don't get the round ending music or anything like that. It just cuts out everything, and then Shao Kahn does the winner announcement, and then it goes on from there. And I was like, and I noticed that he's like, well, I coded it directly from the beta. I said, I know, and like, it's really weird. Like, it's really janky. Why is there, like, why couldn't there be music? So Paul was like, okay, 15 minutes later, we've got music. Like
Yeah, like
we've
now we're
got
good.
round ending music. It's like, all right, that's perfect. And so yeah, so yeah, credit to Paul for the coding of the classic style brutalities. Yes, my thing, and this was kind of a hard thing to keep secret was because it wasn't published in the like the outward public facing change log was the MKX brutalities. And the reason I called them MKX brutalities was because MKX had been out for a while and they had those like instant brutalities where if you meet certain criteria
Right.
during the match, if you do certain moves, so many hits in a combo, so much health remaining, if you land that fatal blow, it's an instant brutality. And again, uh, trying to stay in the spirit of the arcade days. Well, what's better for an instant brutality than the final hit just blowing your opponent to pieces?
Sure. Yeah, because that's what
Yeah,
brutalities were.
exactly.
So
So,
every character pretty much has a unique uh, MKX brutality where if you fulfill certain conditions during the match, um, and you hit them with the correct final shot, they will suddenly explode, and you'll be
y-
like, "What happened?"
yeah, yeah. I remember the first time that somebody stumbled upon one. Like I think the bug report uh, channel on the Discord server lit up. I'm like, oh, what's this? It's like, oh, I did this and the opponent exploded, and then it said brutality, but the brutality letters didn't fly across the screen. They just popped up all at the same time. Like, what's going on with that? And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, like, why would you think that's a bug? That is awfully intricately done.
It is
Like,
pretty intricate, yeah.
it's almost like none of that happened on accident.
Right, right.
And it's like, oh wow, congratulations. I'm gonna look into that.
Yeah, sure, I'll look into it. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
fine.
and then after a while, it's like, okay, yeah, these are a thing. These are real. Like
Yeah,
they're not bugs. It's like my crowning achievement for beta one.
yeah. And
Yeah,
they are, people are still figuring them out. I don't think necessarily outside of you and anyone who was like testing. I feel like some of them are still not really known.
right, right. And I am on my YouTube channel. Every so often, I'll publish a new brutality with the requirements. I have a video out there that shows all of them being performed, but like not telling you exactly
Yeah,
how to do them.
you can kind
Uh,
of like maybe figure it out or
right,
have an idea watching it, but you don't actually have the step by step,
right. Yep.
which is fun. I think
Yes.
it's fun
Oh,
because I think a
definitely.
lot of people kind of take for granted now, but back in arcade days, like, and especially with Mortal Kombat and Midway stuff, they just loved throwing in those random secrets that they wouldn't tell anybody about, and people would go crazy hunting for them, and all of a sudden someone would find something, and everyone would be like, you're full of crap, that's not real," and that kind of thing.
Yes.
Um, so moving on to Beta 2. So Beta 2 released this year.
Mhm.
And like you said, it was like a 2.5 years. So I think around the time we met was when you were working on Noob Saibot, which was the big new character for Beta 2 in the sense that he existed in the game previously, and he was kind of just he had Kano's combo inputs. He didn't have any special moves. He had some like special properties, like he was fast, he had boss health, whatever.
Yeah.
Um, but it wasn't the Noob Saibot that people were familiar with from MK Trilogy or some of the home ports from for UMK3. So you went in and had to create his very unique special moves from scratch. Um, and I remember that time because Drew would stream his development every Thursday. Um, every Thursday night would be, what's going to happen the Mortal Kombat hacking stream. And I remember just you just trying to get the disabler orb to work, the clone toss, and like all the weird stuff that would happen because there's so many weird things going on there. Um, and I feel like for Beta 2, I feel like if Rain was kind of like if Rain and Brutalities were like the showcase point, I guess, of Beta 1, of being like, hey, this is like the really cool thing that you can immediately see, and this is, super cool. I feel like Noob is one of those for Beta 2. He's a showpiece, I guess you could say.
Definitely. I agree with that wholeheartedly. And the thing with Noob was like working on Noob actually made me understand the game a whole lot better because after I did Noob, I went back and redid some of Rain's stuff to make it to make it, I guess, better, make
I
him not
remember,
suck so much as a
you,
character.
I remember you also saying too that like a lot of what you did for Rain was kind of like it worked, but it was a lot of like duct tape and paper clips and rubber bands, and then you kind of went back and made the code more optimized. I know you were huge into optimization because a lot of people don't really understand, especially now where games take up so much space, or you know there's patches coming out every 2 weeks or whatever, but you are working with a very finite amount of space
Yes.
to have it run on original hardware. Like if you were just running it on MAME, you could probably BS some stuff, but having it run on actual hardware, you have to be mindful of pretty much every byte of data that you are using, and that does come down to a lot of really boring code optimization.
Yes. Yeah. So there were a lot of, I guess, hot fixes you could call them going in to beta one, where it
Right.
was like, okay, so this caused this issue on hardware. How can I fix this really quick? So instead of just moving the code around to get the piece to fit in, the piece to fix things to kind of fit into the code, okay, well we're gonna drop a hook right here and we're gonna jump out to this code with this hook to fix it, and then we're gonna drop back into the original into the routine.
Right.
So I call that like hot fix style coding. Like, oh, it's
Sure.
broken
You
here.
like a
Let's jump out here
band-aid.
and fix it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, dudes like band-aids and second skin all over that.
Okay.
You
It's a
know?
horrible exoskeleton. It's like an alien.
Yeah, pretty much. And one of the things too, if you in MAME, if you do like the unlimited timer cheat
Yeah.
and you do something with unlimited health, Rain will crash the game. Like 10 times out of 10, Rain will crash the game in beta 1, because there's some piece of code that gets left behind in his lightning strike move that, for whatever reason, after a while, the game's like, we're not doing this anymore. Reset. And I think it had something to do with something in the lightning strike, like the assets on the screen. Just because they're invisible doesn't mean they're not there. I think
Yeah.
like there was a process in there somewhere that didn't terminate properly. So after a while, you're practicing your lightning strike combos, right? You've
Right.
done so many lightning strikes, and the game's like, oh, there's too much going on right now, and the hardware's schizophrenic, so it's freaking out.
Right. Yeah. It says see ya. We're done.
Yeah, and yeah, and hardware especially. I mean, you can't do that on hardware unless you build in some more custom code to stop the time, like the debug options or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
But and the thing is that would never happen during a match, because there's a timer. and
Right.
there's just not enough time to cause any real issues. So
You end up fixing bugs that even don't necessarily come into play um, on real hardware, but are still kind of like issues.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Uh,
and yeah, code optimization was a big thing. Just A for that reason, but B for like, so like I think I finished in quotes Rain sometime in like late 2018, early 2019, something like that.
right.
And the game didn't release until September 2019. So, there was a lot of time that I kind of learned a lot in that time frame too. Uh, and like there was other stuff that I optimized also, like classic Sub Zero's Ice Spike Fatality.
Right.
Um, Noob stuff got optimized 2 or 3 times. Um, but yeah,
Yeah, noob is the definition of like paper clips and like, Elmer's glue. I feel like at first.
at first it was, and it's like,
Yeah.
okay, let's take this and like let's make it look like it belongs in the code. So if anybody ever tries to tear it apart, they don't look like that guy with the disheveled hair and the beard and mustache, with the map with the strings pointing everywhere. And that's
Yeah.
and that's how the clone throw works.
Yeah. Yeah. Because those are very like, I mean, you probably wouldn't think much of it, but like those are very complicated moves. Like Noob has a very unique set of special moves.
Right. Yeah, because with the disabler, you can still do all your animations. You just can't do special moves. You can't hit and you can't
Right.
throw. Um, and then the clone throw. Oh my gosh, the
Yeah, the
clone
clone
throw.
throw.
I had to build a new reaction, and I also had to build a new like all I used all existing sprites, so I didn't have to make any custom sprites, obviously.
Right.
But I had to build um, sprite headers or sprite tables or animation tables where they go all like from being thrown into almost a jump animation into their flip frames.
Right.
And that was and the reason that it had to be so custom was because x and y coordinate offsets for certain sprites are different, so they had to be kind of uh, they had to be done at a very custom level, I guess, in order to get the X and Y offsets right and to make it look right for all the characters.
Yeah, and
Like
I
Kano,
remember that like when you were doing the clone toss and like the clone would connect and then all of a sudden the character would pop on the other side of the screen and then flow up, fly up from there because something wasn't quite right.
right? Yeah, and it's and because like the clone throw, excuse me, the clone throw takes on like the clone takes on Noob's character ID, but like it's a projectile, but it has to act like a character.
Right.
So basically, when the throw connects, uh, the character's control, like the opponent's control thread, you have to grab Noob's uh, Noob's control thread out of there, put it in memory, drop the control thread of the clone into that spot in memory to replace Noob's control thread, have them flip, have the clone flip the opponent, and then as soon as the flip happens, throw Noob's control thread back into the appropriate memory slot in order to make it all work.
Right. And,
And,
throws them at an arc of some kind or,
yeah,
however that aspect of it too, kind of just making sure that it functioned properly as a move.
right. And that was all very fun.
Oh yeah, it was a lot of fun.
It was a good learning experience. And then the
You
what's really interesting about the teleport, the teleport slam, is what you see in UMK3 Plus and what you see in Trilogy is not the beta source code. Like Him
Oh,
going and getting you is.
right,
But there, and if you play the trilogy beta, because the trilogy beta ROM is out there as well,
right,
and if you play that, you'll actually see, and if you examine the source code going along with it, you'll see where it stores Noob's original location. Because when he grabs you in the beta, he grabs you and then he brings you back down. He takes you down and then he comes back on the top of the screen where he was. So it stores Noob's original location and actually puts you back in Noob's location. And then the opponent does their little bounce thing or whatever, and Noob actually jumps away, which was changed for the final version of Trilogy, which let me segue that really appropriately into, we don't build broken characters,
right.
right? Because Noob is ridiculously broken in MK Trilogy. All he has to do is get you in the air and it's game over.
Yeah.
So
He's kind
there
of
was,
legendary in that sense, in
yes,
terms of how much he breaks everything.
legendary and banned.
Yeah,
So like there's this delicate balance, right? Of like, we need to make him like, if I'm gonna make him, I've got to make him to like, if I'm gonna bring him into the arcade as a viable character with his own move set, I have to do it in such a way that people are going to want to play as him because he's like good,
right,
but at the same time, not make him broken like he was in the console releases, because then nobody will want to play against him.
right.
So it's like striking a delicate balance again, and there were people that were not happy about that.
Yep.
Um, I mean,
Yep.
we're talking like 4 a.m. diatribes, uh,
Yeah.
followed by rage quits on Discord. It's like,
Yeah.
at least give me a chance to respond.
Yeah,
But
I mean,
yeah,
the community is passionate when it comes to gameplay changes. We'll say that.
yes. And which I will say, you mentioned that, outside of Noob and Rain and some very obvious horrendous bugs and glitches, there are no gameplay changes to the default settings of UMK3 Plus.
Yeah,
None.
preserving that was very important for
Yes,
you.
preserving arcade gameplay as original, extremely important. For uh, the preservation standpoint, but also from the competitive standpoint, you don't look at all these old heads that have been playing the game since the arcade days, along with the guys that came on like in '06 with Xbox Live, and then later on with PSN and the MK Arcade Collection, on those different platforms, as well as the guys that play online with MAME over at Kylera and on Fightcade now. You don't look at those guys and be like, hey, play it like this.
Yeah.
Here's this is the same game, but now it's all jumbled up, and this is what we're going to play. You'll get laughed out of the room.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Uh, so yeah. Um,
But what you did add were, we're going to use the word, your favorite word, were options.
Options, yes, yes. Did I just wanted to make it absolutely as clear as I possibly could in the public facing change log that, like, yeah, these are options. They're off by default. Take them with a grain of salt. Don't use them in a competitive environment because they're options. It's not original gameplay. It's totally up to you if you want to use it or not. If you don't want to use it, don't use it. That's why it's an option. Turn it on if you want, turn it off if you don't.
Yeah.
It's your choice. It's a
And, and
beautiful thing.
and the thing that I think is really cool about that is because you can enjoy a lot of the changes and additions to the game and still play it the way that you want to play it. So if someone comes into it and wants to see, like, oh, Khan's arena staircase isn't broken anymore, like the stage looks better, like, stuff is working better in terms of a lot of like visual and audio stuff, you can still enjoy that and play the game exactly as it was.
Right.
Um, but if you do want something else, enabling a lot of the different options in Plus kind of turns it almost into like I think of it as like the Street Fighter 2 like remix kind of thing where it's like you're playing, if you turn those options on, you're kind of playing a bit of a remixed version of the game that has some tweaks and some additions and some really interesting stuff. Like there is some really interesting stuff in there, and if you don't want to deal with it, you never have to deal with it. But if you're annoying like I am and like turning over all the things on and seeing what they do,
Yeah.
so you created a lot of they're called, I think it's called balanced mode.
Yes.
Um, and so that changes some things in the sense that it gives a couple of characters additional moves, but it mostly makes small tweaks to characters who maybe weren't that great and kind of. I know you said your kind of philosophy on that was to kind of bring characters up as opposed to like taking really good characters and making them worse, or it's more of a like what can we do to make this character more fun or more viable to play if you so choose.
Yes.
So
Absolutely.
I think one of the characters that benefits the most and is one of the most interesting is Scorpion
Yes.
in this. So Scorpion is not vanilla Scorpion is not particularly good in UMK3, and Smoke is essentially Human Smoke is essentially just good Scorpion.
He is. He
If you
is.
want to think
He
of it
is.
that way.
He is way better Scorpion. He is, 3 tiers better Scorpion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what was interesting was so Scorpion in MK Trilogy did have a forward teleport punch. Um, and so that was one of the things you added. But the other thing that you added I thought was really interesting in that Scorpion has this, 3-hit combo that ends with an elbow. I think it's 3 or 4 hit combo that ends with an elbow.
Yep.
And so what was changed on that specifically was the reaction on that last hit makes it possible that if you time it right, you can extend the combo from there when you could not before. And just the number of options that plus the teleport punch, those two things alone give to Scorpion just makes him so much more fun to play, and also not just crappy smoke.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's amazing what just a few frames here and there can do for a character's ability to be competitive against some of the top tier, like some of the higher tier characters.
Right,
So like only Scorpion gets uh, the forward teleport punch, and
right,
that's basically, I mean, it's like a dash punch, really.
right,
Uh, and it's linkable, like you can do something like, and with the 3 hit elbow combo, one, yeah, it changes the reaction to where they just kind of pop up a little bit, and you still got to have good timing, uh, but the the recovery time from that elbow is also much lower, so you can get back into movement and controlling the character instead of sitting there with his elbow sticking out.
right.
You get control back a few frames earlier, so yeah, you can extend the combo. I mean, you could do, the elbow combo into a forward teleport punch, into a spear, and then finish that however you choose. Um, the forward, I'm sorry, the regular teleport, if it connects in that situation only, can be the forward teleport can be linked directly off of that, uh, creating more potential juggle combinations. Like you
Yeah,
can't go forward teleport directly to backward teleport, um, and you can't spam forward and back, forward and back. But if you do hit them with a regular teleport punch, if they're in those reaction frames, like the stumble back or the fall back frames, you can hit them again with a forward teleport punch, just to give Scorpion some more options. Uh, just to give him more options to add more damage to his combo, because he's got to work really hard for the damage that he gets anyway. And this helps. It brings him up without turning him into another clone character, essentially.
yeah. It definitely differentiates him, and I think something with vanilla UMK3 is so human smoke for everyone who's not really initiated. Human smoke in vanilla is sort of he is basically a hidden character. He's only accessible if you hold a button combination when you choose robot smoke, but it's not like it's random whether you get him or not. You can consistently play as him, but as he is in that game, human smoke kind of just makes Scorpion kind of irrelevant because they're basically the same, but human smoke is like much faster and can do some extra stuff that Scorpion can't. So that balance change in particular, I really liked because it made Scorpion more unique, and there was a reason to use him over Human Smoke or someone else.
Right.
And I think that's what a lot of these balance options do is give the characters some new possibilities, some new dimensions to their existing gameplay, but not by, all of a sudden giving them like 10 new moves or,
Jesus.
having them, fly through the air or whatever. Like it's very contained
Yes.
stuff. It's very carefully considered stuff because you went back and forth on so many of them. I remember.
Yeah. Yeah, there was just a lot that might have been fun to do, I guess.
Right.
But at the same time, it's like Shiva's air throw.
Yep. Yep.
Like
I was thinking of Shiva.
I was trying to give her an air throw that worked, but at the same time, you know, didn't break her competitive balance, which is pretty null
Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah.
She doesn't have much competitive balance.
Yeah.
She's the worst character in the game by a long shot. Um, the air throw was actually just too good. Um,
Yeah.
because like she had the little mini pop up with the 4 hit, 5 hit if you do a jump starter,
Yep.
and you could just combo that into a jump kick and an air throw, and it was just like 65% damage. Like
Yeah.
that's too
Yeah.
that's too good.
That's kind of pushing
Um,
it.
yeah, and and maybe it's something worth revisiting. Just make it lower damage or something, or
Yeah.
something like that. But it's a shame because like her regular throw animation um, actually works really well as an air throw.
Oh, okay. I was kind of
Yeah,
wondering about that, how you felt about it visually too, because, again, people don't necessarily know, but, you can't just add new sprites and new stuff willy-nilly. You're working with a finite amount of space. So, a lot of the stuff that you do and add and change needs to be able to work with the existing stuff.
right,
So, if Shiva did an air throw and the existing throw animation for her looked stupid in the air, didn't look right, it's not necessarily going to be a matter of, well, we'll just make a new one because
right.
right, because that's a different thing entirely.
Yes, completely. That is 100% correct.
And
Um,
I guess one quick thing because Shiva reminded me of it. So Shiva's pretty much the worst character in UMK3, but in MK Trilogy on N64, Shiva is extremely good, and I think
yes,
a lot of people don't realize how different Trilogy and UMK3 are, and a lot of people might be like, well, why don't you just make MK Trilogy Plus? Like that's just the better version of UMK3. There's more characters and yada yada. What do you feel about that?
um, well, then it wouldn't be UMK3 plus anymore. It would just be Trilogy plus.
Right,
Um, and there's a lot that would go into that. But let me first touch on what you mentioned about how different Trilogy is from UMK3. And I'm talking about final releases here. I'm not
right,
talking about betas or anything like that. So the disc versions play more like UMK 3.5. You get the MK2 characters, some of the MK1 characters, uh, and the sprites are resized to better fit uh, in with the console requirement or the console limitations.
right.
Um, so you get things, you get combo properties that are a little bit different. um, but you still get pretty much all of the characters' frames of animation,
Right.
and that's what helps make it play like UMK3 with slightly different sprite sizes and 60 hertz, 60 frames per second instead of 54.
Yeah, a lot of
So
people do
play,
not know that, and I didn't know
yeah,
that myself. That
yeah,
UMK3 does not run. It runs at 54
yep,
very intentionally.
yep, that's the truth. So N64 trilogy um, is different. It's very much different, as you can tell. It looks different, it sounds different, and it plays different. And it plays different in such a way that it is good. Like it's an accidentally good port of Mortal Kombat.
Because it's
And
something that's it's not just attempting. It doesn't just end up being a kind of weird version of UMK3. It kind of ends up being its own thing
yeah,
accidentally.
exactly. And the reason for that is and you can tell just by watching how the characters move at the character select screen. Frames are cut all over the place. The final version of the game, I believe, is the 96 megabit. So what is that? 96 divided by 8 is that 12 megabyte? So it's a smaller cartridge than what it started out as. I believe it started out at the first beta was 16 megabyte
Yeah, the
or
beta
100.
size is bigger, which
Yeah.
yeah.
Yep.
And they were like, "Well,
And
we're not paying for that."
probably that's probably
Basically.
exactly how it went down. But anyway, so some of the frames were cut, and those frames of animation weren't just cut out of their they weren't just cut out of their idle stances. They were cut in other places. So when you have something, say that, in the case of Shiva, her high kicks are extremely fast. And that's because she's missing a few frames of animation in that kick. And if you say, well, there's, 3 frames between each movement. Now, 3 frames is an extremely small period of time, and you have to be able to see it animate. So if you have like a 2 or 3 frame delay between, every time the her leg moves up to perform a high kick, then if you have less frames to do it, between grounded and peak leg height, if you only have, say, 3 frames there instead of 4 frames, uh, you're going to like the move is going to come out. Not only is it going to come out sooner and be active sooner, but she's going to go back into her idle stance quicker, so there's going to be less recovery frames.
Right.
So to bring that full circle, there are animations cut for every character. So things like crouching low kicks, they end up being positive on, or I'm sorry, they end up being plus on hit, which ends up giving you free rush down if you hit a crouching low kick. So you'll see guys incorporate just slightly different play styles to where they'll do run jab pressure, but then they'll occasionally drop down and do a crouching low kick. And the reason behind that is they get free rush down if they do. The other one of the other things that like Shiva in the corner has a crouching high kick infinite if she
Yep.
gets you in the corner. Um, and then another thing she can do is her crouching high kick again, because the crouching high kick in the arcade is the most useless move for every character. But it's more useful in Trilogy on the N64 because of the missing frames of animation, the sprite sizes, stuff like that. Sprite sizes affect the hitboxes.
Right.
So Shiva has this crazy anti air where she can hit you with a crouching high kick and then run in with an anti-air low punch and then do a ground stomp. And that connects for like 25% damage or something ridiculous.
Yeah,
Um,
it's
all
wild.
off of a crouching anti-air high kick. Or I'm sorry, an anti-air crouch kick. It's it just makes it a different game.
All I see in my mind is her bouncing the opponent like offer toe like forever.
Exactly. Yes. And somebody got caught in that in a tournament that was streamed, and people were just losing their minds, just absolutely going crazy. The commentator was just going nuts over it. It was amazing, really. Honestly, it was. It was fun to watch, and it shows you just what uh, people don't really think about it, but just what missing frames of animation or just animation changes can do to a game.
Yeah,
Um,
and just make it just so wildly different.
Yeah, because the missing frames of animation, they didn't take that into account when they, how many sitting duck frames they're in, and then, the delay between frames when they go back from their recovery back to their idle stance. They didn't take the missing frames into account. So it significantly changed the game. The other thing that changed the game was, or one of the things that changed the game was like Ermac, Scorpion, and Human Smoke. They hardly have any cooldown at all on their teleport punches. So Scorpion,
Oh,
if Scorpion catches you or Ermac catches you at like peak height, he can just like teleport punch you all the way across the screen, like back and forth until the
yeah.
hit limit's reached. And it looks kind of janky because it is janky, uh, but it does change the dynamics a little bit.
So something special, I guess you could say, that the N64 version of Trilogy has is a sort of a combo character, lovingly referred to as Super Sub-Zero.
Yep.
And so in the N64 version of Trilogy, to save space, the unmasked version of Sub-Zero, the actual kind of like vanilla MK3 Sub-Zero, was cut, all
Yep.
his graphics and everything. And so what they did was they kind of took the other Sub Zero character, classic Sub Zero, and gave him the moves that the unmasked Sub Zero has. So he's kind of a fusion of the two,
Yes.
and that is a very that's just kind of something unique to Trilogy. So you can probably guess what I'm about to get onto is
Of course.
um, for Beta 2 of Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3 Plus, Drew created new Ultimate Combat Code characters. And for anyone who's not familiar, when you are playing in the arcade on Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3 Plus, or sorry, Vanilla Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3, and you game over, um, or you finish whatever, there's a screen that comes up that says please enter Ultimate Combat Code or whatever, and so a lot of people are familiar with like the versus screen in MK3, and you can push buttons to make little images change on the bottom of the screen, and some of those are actually like codes that will make things happen, like it might give one of the players like half health, or it'll make it so that someone explodes at the end of the match. Um, but these ones unlock actual characters in arcade. And in the arcade, those characters were Melina, Classic Sub Zero, and Ermac. Um, these are a little different because they're 10 digits. They're harder to do, and you have a time frame where you're allowed to enter one and see if it works. But in Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3 Plus and in a lot of MK3 hacks, they have the characters available by default. So you don't need to do those to get Melina or Ermac or whatever. So for Beta 2, you went in and basically made new hidden characters.
Yeah.
So on top of all the changes and Noob Saibot being fully featured and fatalities and endless bug fixes and a whole host of other things, um, you decided to make three new hidden characters, and the secret's kind of up on them now. Like everyone kind of it's out there now.
Yeah.
One of those characters is Super Sub Zero, basically as he is in Mortal Kombat Trilogy, in the sense that he has the moves of both Sub Zeros. Um, so there's two other ones, and I was kind of curious what did you what was the criteria that you kind of used when designing these characters, because these characters are not necessarily characters that would be used competitively. They're kind of like the secretest of the secret, so they're kind of I think the word you use is that they're all sort of super in a way.
Yeah.
So what was your philosophy on designing the three characters that you made
Uh,
for Ultimate Combat Code?
yeah. Well, they had to be fun to play with. Uh, they had to again fit into the vision of the arcade. Um, and they had to be worth, be fun to play, but also worth finding and worth unlocking to play as them, if
Right.
that makes sense.
Because guessing a 10-digit code is not exactly easy.
Right.
If you guess
Exactly.
it and then get something crappy, then you're like, well, that was a waste.
Yes, exactly.
So Super Sub Zero is one of those, which is super cool. No pun intended.
Ah,
Um, Another one of those is Chameleon, who is a character that exists in Mortal Kombat Trilogy and the CD versions, who he kind of transforms between all the different ninjas.
yep.
And I know making that character was interesting for you because, there's so many questions that you might not think about, when playing as the character, but it's like, what happens if he changes character in the middle of a combo? What happens if, he's hit in the middle of being while he's transforming? What is he going to look like when when you get to finish him? Like, what's going to happen? Is he going to keep changing colors? Like, there's so much that can and does go wrong.
Yes.
What was the biggest challenge for you for Chameleon?
um, the biggest challenge for Chameleon was to get him to behave. Uh, really. So, like, if you i- getting him to behave while at the same time making him play and act like Chameleon in the disc versions of the game. Um, and the hardest part of that is, uh, Chameleon kind of phases in and out. Like he's the character, like he's obviously got the character's palette, but he kind of phases in and out of visibility, which uh, on the PlayStation, or actually the disc versions in general, there's transparency that is able to be used. He phases in and out because of sprite transparency. The arcade hardware does not support any level of transparency. And you might say something like, "But Drusus, what about the life bars? When their health goes down, the red in their health bar is transparent." And I'll counter that with, "No, it's not." Um, what you see in one character's life bar is you see two separate graphics with alternating transparent pixels. Now, I just said the hardware doesn't support transparency. It does support transparent pixels. There is a difference, an amount. So basically, it's on or off. And the way the life bars work is there's two separate life bar graphics, and the red, the depleted health section, is, like I said, it's two separate images, and they have red colored pixels every other pixel. So you have a transparent pixel, a red pixel, transparent pixel, red pixel. Well, the
Right.
other one has red pixel, transparent pixel, red pixel, transparent pixel. And every frame they swap in and out of visibility. So there's a property for every sprite on the screen, whether it is visible or invisible. And so
Right.
every frame they swap visibility properties, and that creates a transparency effect. It is impossible to do with characters that have solid colors in their sprites without transparent pixels all over the place.
Right.
So part of Chameleon's transformation routine between each character is that he's got that he's got, I think, 8 separate palettes that he cycles through, um, giving kind of a almost a like a rainbow waterfall effect, if that makes sense.
Right.
And after that happens, he blinks in and out of transparency, or I'm sorry, in and out of visibility, kind of a random set. Like it's a overall, it's a fixed amount of time, but the blinks can be, I think, can vary by a frame or two. And then once the blinks are complete and his palette has his next character's palette has come through, then he's the next character. The transition's complete. Getting him to behave through that is
Right.
because okay, so you got to think about it, right? What are some things that can happen during any time of the game? Like you can get spun by Cabal, and that changes your palette because your character just becomes the spinning web, right?
Right.
You can get frozen by Sub Zero, which changes your palette for however many frames, and then it gives you your palette back when you're no longer frozen. So not only do you have to um, have him, do his palette rainbow waterfall, his blink in and out of transparency, and all that, you also have to, in every frame that occurs, you have to check, am I frozen? Like, did Sub Zero freeze me? Okay, stop. Or am I frozen? No. Okay, do it again. Another frame tick goes by. Am I frozen? So thinking of all those different variables, and like I said, making him behave through his transformation frames was probably his biggest challenge.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds extremely complicated, especially if you add to that. Um, I know, so I guess we can talk about palettes now. There are multiple palettes per character, not just for, them fighting or whatever, but the way that Mortal Kombat 3 handles dismemberment, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
I usually call it sprite slicing. I don't know what the actual term would be for it, but when you uppercut someone's head off or chop them in half or whatever, those versions, I guess, of the character also have assigned palettes, and they also can go wrong. So one of the big things for this beta was selectable palettes, which is not something that's possible in the original game. Not only are there selectable palettes between the original and the alternate, there is a third palette that every character has.
Right.
And so this system of you know creating these wasn't just, oh, okay, everyone gets one new coat of paint and call it a day. It's like, well, no, they get like seven coats of paint or whatever, and depending on situation. um and then you had a lot of fun making it so that the palettes would actually stay consistent after certain moves.
Yes.
Tell me about, so I remember, so we we talked about this a lot. When Drew was making pallets late into the night because of my horrible sleep schedule, I was usually up, and he would send me pictures of all the the wild color schemes he was coming up with, and all of the headaches that came with it. I think a lot of people kind of assume that palette swaps are just this very simple thing. Like in theory, you could just have like 7 million palettes or whatever per character, and it's no big deal. You're just you change a couple of values, and that's it. What is the reality of that?
Well, now that you asked, thought you never would.
I told you I'd get
So,
to
yeah. So the fun, like I mentioned before about being frozen or being spun by Cabal or anything that makes your character temporarily change palettes. It affects the way that the game deals with your palette, because the way it works with mirror matches is that it wants to assign a palette, but then it says, oh, is so player two, it basically, the code in the game more or less asks, hey, Is player one the same character ID as me? Oh, it is. Okay, let me use this palette instead. And it's a very simplified way of doing it. And if you look, so like the characters with beheading fatalities, like Katana's fan slice, worst fatality in the game, by the way.
It's very boring, yeah.
And like Ermac is a very his example sticks out as well. Uh, but if you notice, they'll their palettes will basically revert back. So if player one Katana fan slices player two Katana, she'll go from that light blue color uh, back to player one's palette as soon as her head is cut. Ermac is a glaring example because his player one palette is dark skin with, the red outfit. And then player two Ermac is lighter skin with kind of a darker, I guess, a darker red outfit,
Yeah,
or a more, almost maybe a more truer red outfit. And then when player one Ermac decapitates player two Ermac, decapitated player two Ermac has dark skin and player one red palette on his outfit. Um,
very jarring.
yeah. So in MK3, some of the characters, this is compensated for. Um, I think like player one, yeah, I call them cut sprites, and then which leads to them being cut palettes. Because player one Jax has that fatality where he slices you up and then your body falls into three or four pieces on the ground, right?
Right.
Um, so I guess it's four pieces: head, torso, upper legs, and lower legs. Um, but since Jax can do that to Jax, they created a second palette for him. They created a second cut palette. So with these palette updates, is that some of this actually happens in beta one with like Ermac, Human Smoke, Katana, guys like characters like that. You start to come into when you create new palettes for characters and you make them selectable, it's no longer okay. Am I the same palette as this guy? Or am I the same character as this guy? Okay, I need to change my color. Now it is okay, this is the color palette that's been selected. I need to be this palette. Or in 2v2, oh my goodness. Like,
Oh
okay, what
yeah.
what round number is it? Am I the front character? Am I the back character? Am I the active character? Which palette do I take? So that all gets those are all flags that are set in memory now. So when you get frozen by Sub-Zero, you know what palette to come back to. In 2v2, the characters in vanilla, or if they were frozen by Sub-Zero, or if they were spun by Cabal or something like that, they would essentially change clothes and come out with another palette when they come out of their freeze or they come out of the spin animation. So not only, like you mentioned, there's a bunch of different palettes. You have um, what did I think like six separate, or no, four separate palettes for every character. I can't remember. Um, but in order to do it right, it also has to accommodate this feature on the new character select screen, which is their versus
Right.
screen sprites, as well as if you're on the classic select screen, it's got to make the transition so the correct palette comes in on the versus screen. So you have your player one battle palette, you have you have your in battle palette, you have your cut palette, and then you have what can be up to three separate palettes on the versus screen.
Right.
So you have a lot and you think the entire cast is 25, 26 characters or something like that. And if you don't count Shao Kahn and Motaro, you still have like 24 characters, or however many it is. Um, you you got to create that third palette, that third cut palette, that third versus palette for every one of them. So that's a lot of palettes. There's a lot of palette management that goes on. Um, and as you know, basically keeping me sane for some of those long evenings that became long nights, that became early mornings. Um, there's a lot that goes into managing palettes and keeping everything together.
Yeah, it was kind of astonishing to me how certain things worked or didn't work. I guess would
Oh
be
yeah,
part of
as
it.
as well as, oh, we picked the same palette. What do we do now?
Right,
That was a very easy that was a very easy fix for that. Is player one palette's respected. End of story.
right.
So we'll just randomly generate you another one.
So you ended up creating not just, selectable palettes and an additional third palette for each character, but basically all of that times like five, essentially, or six even. Where it's like, I think, what did you say? I want to say you said it was around like 80 something palettes in total by the time all was said and done,
Yeah,
with a
yeah,
roster of like, like 20 something characters. Um, yeah, that's like, okay, so all of a sudden that goes from what you might think is one bit of work, and that's, ends up being four times the amount of work because of just what that involves. And I know, so when we were all testing, because Drew had a legion of testers for beta 2, and we would get the new builds. The thing that would happen most of the time is if there was something that was noticeable that happened, it was usually the palette messed up. He changed into the wrong color. Uh, I uppercutted him through the stage, and all of a sudden he was purple. Like that kind of stuff. Um, and I know you spent a lot of time trying to fix all of that. Um, and that I think is another one of the kind of the showpiece features of Beta 2, because all of the new palettes and the ability to select palettes is an entirely new feature um, that's never been possible in arcade, and it's never even been possible in the home ports, from what I remember.
right.
Um, so figuring out how that was going to work, I think so. There was that, and then like you switch palettes by pressing start on the select screen, and what happens if you move the cursor after you change the character's palette and then move it back. Like that whole thing was you know wild as
Yep.
well. Um, So, the last, jumping back a bit because I wanted to get to palettes, but the last big thing I really wanted to bring up was the final Ultimate Combat Code character was a very closely guarded secret. Um, he was a fun one. We had a little group chat of everybody who was testing him. Um, and so the final character might be surprising to some people. I think a lot of people were like, "Well, you did one chameleon, so you probably did the other one," or you know, you put one of the trilogy characters in, like Raiden's in there somewhere or whatever. But
Fujin.
yeah, Fujin's in there. Yeah, Fujin, he's still there. You just got to find him. Um, but the third character that you did was actually Triborg, which is
Yeah.
a character that was introduced in Mortal Kombat X, who, depending on which version of him you select, became either Cyrax, Sector, or Smoke. Um, so what was your thought process on this one? Like, what I guess what made you decide to go for this one?
This was one that, like, I know I mentioned, like, oh, we don't make broken characters, right?
Right.
Um, and to an extent, that's still true.
Yep.
But I wanted to create a monster.
Frankenstein's monster.
I wanted to create a character that was fun, dominant, and hard to find. Um, there are no hints of him dropped anywhere in the game. Um, there's no well in the audits there's kind of something in there, but there are no like if you do it. One of the added treasures was an Ultimate Combat Code character fight in which he's not in there. Um, there is no hint of him in the game, and I wanted to make it, you know, if you're gonna find them, you're gonna find them the right way. You're gonna find them like they did in the arcade days,
Right.
more or less. Like you know, put some hints together, and you still might not find him. The Ultimate Combat Code in N64 Trilogy wasn't discovered for almost 20 years.
Yeah, that's wild to me.
Yeah. So I went about, you know, at first, like my first thought was to create him as almost like a morphable character where you did this basically, regular Triborg has this, a couple of auto combos, but if, to really experience him, you have to, do certain button combinations and that morphs him into one of the other robots.
Right.
Um, yeah, like the original concept was going to be like, some sparks, like, when they're dizzy or when they're about to be
Yeah.
finished, the sparks fly out, like, a couple sparks and then a palette change or like a version of that palette, like a duller palette or something. Um, but then that kind of became the first trying to build that was, there was too much that could break.
Sure.
So I decided, okay, we're gonna give him all the moves of all the robots. At the same time, I wanted him to, not be able to lock you down, like, oh, throw a smart missile or throw a homing missile, throw a net, throw a spear, all,
Yeah, at the same
within.
time. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, so again, you had to strike that balance, right? Um, so there's a kind of like okay, you've thrown a teleport punch with, and that's something that Smoke and Sector can do. So you're going to be locked out of doing Cyrax's net or Cyrax's bombs for however many frames that it is. So you're basically locking in a character for that amount of frames. Same deal with like the auto combos. If you hit somebody with Cyrax's net, you're locked in as Cyrax, so you're going to do Cyrax's punch combos. I don't think his kick combos do not change. He has a
Yeah.
static set of kick combos no matter what. He has sectors uh, punch combos by default because sector doesn't have a containment move like the net or the spear. So, if you're smoke, you spear somebody. Not only are you locked out of sectors moves and Cyrax moves, but if you're going to do punch combos, you're locked into smoke. So you have your smokes punch combos until that stun status is done, and then he's back to good old Triborg can do what he wants. And I felt like that was a good balance that let you play as all three characters without completely breaking the game and making him far too dominant.
Right. And then he also has a couple of moves that he just always has access to.
Yeah, he's always got access to both air throws. So like air smokes air throw, which is just and jump up and hit block in the air when you make contact to throw them. He also has Cyraxes where I think it's down forward block to kind of launch yourself at them, and then you hit low punch. I think when you're in contact range, uh, you hit uh, yeah you hit low punch and it'll throw your opponent. Those two moves are always accessible. Smoke's invisibility is always accessible. Um, I think he has Robot Smoke's throw, like his grounded regular throw.
Yeah.
Uh, I
The,
think those, yeah, I think those are the kind of universal moves.
right. I think there was. I feel like there was one more, but I can't put my finger on what it was. I could be crazy,
Oh,
but
Cyrax's teleport.
oh, right, the teleport.
And you know what? I mean, if somebody's dumb enough to use that move anyway, then
It's
by all
very
means,
not good.
you should be able to do it no matter what character you're locked in as.
Yeah. Um, but even just having the air throws and stuff opens a lot of combo potential, and the invisibility thing is more of a mind game sort of deal anyway. So it makes sense to have that um, happen. And I remember as you were building him, I was like thinking to myself, I'm like, man, this guy is complicated, right? Like I was kind of wondering how he would feel when all was said and done, but he's actually like you acclimate to his existence pretty quickly, um, and you still have enough room to play with, all the different combo opportunities and stuff that he lets you do. There's some very wild stuff that you can do with him, if, provided you have the right timing. Um, Drew talked about the limits on there's like a certain amount of time before he can use another move. So you'll have some cases where you can chuck a grenade down and they'll get blown up by it, and then you know by the time that grenade has blown up, he's reverted back to his standard form. So, if you want to, you can spear them out of the air or whatever. There are certain circumstances that you can do some rule bending stuff, but it's otherwise he's locked he's locked up a little bit, but he's still super fun. Um,
Yeah.
Testing all his fatalities while he was invisible was my fun thing. I liked doing that because you never really know how that's gonna go. Um, and so yeah, we had that little tiny group of people testing him out, and I think my favorite thing about that was that he was kind of hidden in plain sight in some of those test builds. Um, where if someone accidentally you know did the thing that we knew would make him show up, they would technically be able to play as him, but they probably would never do it. No one ever did, which I thought someone was gonna at some point someone was gonna accidentally you know choose him and be like, what is this?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that was risky business. But yeah, he's super cool. And then I was lucky enough to write an ending for him because he needed an ending.
Yep.
So if you play the game, play through as Triborg and see what happens to him. Uh, he has a unique ending. Um,
And I think that ending is done very tastefully, as well as stays completely true. Again, it goes outside the box but stays inside the cabinet.
God, I hate that, but I also love it. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. I'm glad that we were able to come up with something cool in that sense, because it's big part of MK is the lore, and if you start making it, you say, well, whatever, it's Mortal Kombat, but no, Mortal Kombat has a certain feel to it and has certain rules to it, especially in the arcade. And if you divert too much from that, it gets you're like, all right, this is actually stupid. Um, so it was fun to be able to try and write an ending in that kind of original way, that fit, and I think it was fun. I think it's a fun ending. I think people get a kick out of it if they're into Mortal Kombat. Even if they're not, they'll just be kind of like, "What the hell was that?"
Well, and it made sense. It fit in with the rebooted timeline very well.
Yeah, it kind of just worked because this was a character that is kind of unique because there's not another character in this game that is from the future, I guess, in terms of like, it's not like, it's not like you threw Movado in there, or Onaga's not in there. You don't have, all the Kira and Cobra and whoever else starts with a K. Um, they're not in this game, but Triborg is. So that's kind of interesting. That's kind of why I was surprised at first that you went with him. Um, but he's super fun. You should all try him out. You should unlock him. You can probably figure it out by using Google, but I would suggest maybe it would be more fun to struggle and try and figure out his combat code. Um, I don't know how many people will actually do that, but I hope at least a few people have.
Yeah.
So I guess everything else, there's so much going on in this game. You have the endurance towers, you have randomized towers, you have a whole new set of Shao Kahn's treasures. You have the selective darkening with the backgrounds and how they dim during fatalities. So many bug fixes and changes and additions and options and um, so much. I guess, is there anything that we didn't talk about that you wanted to mention or that you were particularly proud of or wanted people to know about, when if they hop in and start playing?
Let's see. The the new character select screen now has random select available.
Oh, right, that's right.
And in the spirit of the original, or in the spirit of um, the new character select screen, um, it is still no samesies allowed if you do 2v2. And random select will keep that locked out, so you don't have to worry about potentially getting the same character twice or the game freaking out or something like that. The balance moves that you mentioned, yeah, it takes some of the lower tiered characters and it brings them up. You mentioned the additional moves. Sector gets his double missile,
Right.
which is fun. That I have. There's a video on my YouTube channel. I think it's called like Sector's Revenge or something like that. Where if anybody hears that, if I think if you just in fact, let me type it. Let me search for it real quick. Um,
It's so
because
funny.
yeah, if you go to my channel and you search for what is it? Yeah, Sector's Revenge. Um, yeah, look that up. That's probably one of that's in the top 5 bugs that I created during development. And I said this when I was talking to Bob from Retro RGB. For every bug fix you see in the game, Paul and I have probably crashed these games 100 times, fixing various bugs. And while we do eventually fix them, obviously, sometimes they're pretty easy and we get them on the first try or two. Sometimes we spend, we might dive down a couple rabbit holes trying to get something figured out.
I was waiting for the rabbit hole. I was waiting for the rabbit hole.
And some of the things that happen when you try to fix a bug inadvertently creating another one are just downright hilarious. Like, too much smoke on the screen, too much blood on the screen from 1.3, too much stuff going on too busy of a stage. And instead of a character jumping in, they just like walk on the screen and you can't hit them, you
They
can't do
walk
anything.
away.
They just keep walking and they're gone, and then the game eventually crashes. Or you do something and then it goes back to like the versus screen, except it's Kano versus Kano, and then it goes to
Yeah.
game over. It's like, what the heck caused that?
Yeah, that was something that even happened in the Genesis Ultimate MK3. Like, you beat Khan and then like push start at a certain time, and the ladder turns into Kano versus Kano versus Kano or whatever.
Yeah,
Very weird stuff. And that's just the home versions. Never mind the arcade craziness.
yeah,
I can't
yes,
believe I didn't even mention too that you added tag mode to 2 versus 2. So if anyone wants a Marvel versus Capcom style thing, you can do that as well and have characters jump in, and that was its own set of bugs and explosions and crashes.
Yeah, that's that one is another one that was Paul's work. Paul
Yeah,
created 2v2 tag mode for MK2 Plus, and it since 2v2 is already built in to UMK3, he made a mode. He created a tag mode for it. Um, and the game functions a little bit differently than MK2 because of the run button, because of auto combos,
right.
just things like that. 2v2 tag had to behave differently. So Paul spent a good time developing that, and I think he did a great job of it. It's fun. Um, I think we could make some tweaks to it to maybe give everybody boss health so that like there's not 100% combos. They're not commonplace, but they're pretty easy to pull off.
Yeah,
You
when
need
we
like
played together, you showed me a couple of those a couple of times.
you need like anybody in Kung Lao, and a competent Kung Lao player. Once they get you in the air, it's over. But I mean, there's just a lot of things in tag mode that can deal a whole lot of damage really quickly, and it's fun. And I think that's what it's for. It's made to be fun.
Right.
Um, and if we could extend the rounds a little bit by, you know, making making everybody take boss damage or something, that would be something to explore. But man, tag mode is a ton of fun.
Yeah, tag mode is fantastic. And again, like there's so much going on in this game, and not only this, but MK2 Plus and the upcoming MK1 Plus. It's just you can't cover all of it. It's a lot. Read the patch notes if you if you download the game. There's a great change log that Drew spent a lot of time writing and really wants everyone to read. So make sure you go through that because there's a lot there, like a lot. Um,
Yes, there is.
and speaking of which, so usually the website is mortalkombatplus.com. I believe that is currently down at the moment.
It's down for the moment. Yeah.
So where can people download the patch or learn more about Ultimate MK3 Plus or any of the other Plus games?
Everything now is available. Now the patches, because we don't supply ROMs because that's illegal.
Right.
Um, Patching is not illegal if you have the hardware or whatever. Um, but and patch files are totally okay to download and create. So the patch files and all that, as well as the change log and download links for the supporting emulators, are at the Mortal Kombat Plus Discord. That's the best way to find it, I think.
We'll include a link to that. I'll include a link to that in the description, and hopefully the site gets back up soon. Now, where can people find you specifically?
Find me on the Discord as well as my uh, YouTube channel. So my Discord is TehDrewsus, hashtag 9065. Uh, the My YouTube channel is TehDrewsus, youtube.com/TehDrewsus. And then Twitter is my handle on Twitter is TehDrewsus_MK.
Sweet. We'll put links to all of that in the description as well for people to check out. You are always uploading new and fun Mortal Kombat stuff on your YouTube, even when even now that development has stopped for now. Um, you just had one the other day showing a lot of people wonder what happens when Sub Zero or Classic Sub Zero goes to rip your head off, and it does that the fade the black thing. So if you've ever wanted to see um, what happens there and maybe some other MK mysteries, should definitely sub to Drew's channel, and I'm sure eventually if Drew decides that he wants to do more with MK3, he'll get back to streaming eventually too.
Eventually, yes.
Eventually.
It's
Um,
hard to do when you got two kids in diapers.
yeah, well, yeah, four kids and then two of them in diapers. Yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah.
Uh, so yeah, so that has been a very special episode about Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3 Plus and kind of Mortal Kombat in general. Love to hear what you think. Some quick housekeeping on my end before we wrap up here. Um, you can go to the Nintendo Pipeline Discord, which you can find a link for on our website, which is half dead still. That is nintendopipeline.wordpress.com. Or you can go to discord.gg/Nintendo Pipeline. Um, Obviously, you're listening to this on something, so whether you're listening on iTunes or Spotify or watching it on YouTube or whatever, we're on so many different services. If you like what you hear, please consider um, subscribing and let us know what you think. I want to thank Drew for being here with me today for this long, in the works and lengthy episode. um, and we will see you next time. So, yeah, until then, take care. Bye bye.
See ya.